a packed stadium, a harmless football near the sidelines. But when one police dog wouldn't stop barking, what they uncovered brought the entire arena to a standstill. Here's the full story, but real quick, drop your dog's name in the comments and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, what we've got coming next, you definitely don't want to miss it. The early October sky was painted in soft strokes of pale blue and gold as the sun began to settle behind the city skyline. Inside the Davenport Metro Arena, a crowd of over 50,000 fans buzzed with anticipation. It was the final game of the regional college football tournament, a fierce rivalry between Wesleyan State and North Pines University. Tailgaters had camped out since dawn, paint-streaked faces cheering in harmony, adrenaline surging through every aisle and corridor. Inside Gate 5, Officer Kyle Mercer adjusted his police vest, scanning the stream of ticket-holding fans flowing through security checkpoints. His partner Zeke, a 5-year-old Belgian Malinois, sat quietly at his side, his ears perked, body coiled like a spring. Kyle had worked with Zeke for 3 years. He knew every twitch of that dog's muscles like the back of his own hand. Today, something about Zeke was different. He was too still, too focused. "Kyle, you good on the east perimeter?" came a voice through his radio. "Yeah," Kyle answered, glancing down at Zeke, just finishing the sweep. The two had already completed the usual routine, checking vendor trucks, inspecting trash bins, sniffing through locker rooms. So far, everything was clear. The atmosphere was electric yet stable. But Zeke wasn't relaxing, not even when they moved away from the busy main gates toward the sidelines to oversee the pre-game warm-ups. Players were jogging, stretching, doing their usual drills. A group of interns rolled out sports bags, crates of gear, and a mesh sack of regulation NCAA footballs. Nothing seemed out of place. But Zeke's head suddenly jerked. His nose twitched. A sharp whine escaped him. Low, brief, urgent. Kyle looked over. Zeke's entire posture had shifted. No longer alert, he was locked, focused. Gaze aimed directly at the edge of the field, more specifically at a single football resting near the 40-yard sideline, seemingly abandoned from warm-ups. "What is it, boy?" Kyle murmured, kneeling beside him. Zeke didn't break focus. He barked once. Then again. Then again. Not random, not bored, not playful. Kyle recognized that bark. Zeke was working. He followed Zeke's gaze. The football sat about 20 yards away. Another football rested a few feet beyond it, but Zeke showed no interest in that one, just the first. Kyle rose and began walking, slow and steady, toward the object. Zeke stayed close, his body tense. It was just a ball, scuffed and brown like any other. But Kyle had learned a long time ago that Zeke didn't set alert on nothing. A maintenance staffer spotted them. "Something wrong, officer?" "Just checking something," Kyle said without taking his eyes off the ball. The football looked completely ordinary, but Zeke was getting more agitated. He barked again, sharper this time, then started circling the ball, never taking his eyes off it. A few nearby interns stopped what they were doing and looked over, confused. A few fans in the lower rows turned their heads. Kyle unclipped his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Mercer. I have a Canine alert on an object near the east sideline. Requesting secondary Canine unit for confirmation." A pause. "Copy that, Mercer. Confirm object type. It's a football. Regulation. Near the sideline." But Zeke's not letting it go. There was static for a beat too long. "Stand by." Kyle stood with his hands on his hips. The football hadn't moved, obviously, but somehow it felt like it was the only thing in the stadium that mattered. He could hear the band starting up, cheerleaders running drills, fans roaring in anticipation. But it all sounded distant, like he'd stepped into a bubble. He crouched down slowly, carefully examining the ball. He didn't touch it. Instead, he looked for signs, seams, cuts, loose panels, nothing stood out visually. No wires, no bulges. Still, Zeke was growling now, a low rumble he only used when he sensed something dangerous. Mercer, we're rerouting Officer Linares and Canine Tango to your location. ETA 4 minutes, the dispatcher replied. Roger, Kyle responded. He stayed near the ball, not touching it. Not yet. As he waited, his eyes scanned the crowd, the field, the personnel. Something was gnawing at him. A memory. 3 months earlier, they'd intercepted a smuggling attempt at a smaller stadium, contraband hidden in water bottles. Someone had figured out the only items that traveled freely between locker rooms, sidelines, and the field were the sports equipment. And what traveled better than a football? Zeke, he said quietly. What the hell did you find? 4 minutes later, Officer Linares arrived, her canine, a large German shepherd named Tango, walking beside her. Kyle gave her a nod. Zeke's locked on that one. Linares gestured and Tango approached. The shepherd moved cautiously, nose twitching, then halted, ears perked. Then he barked. Both dogs now alerting on the same football. Kyle's heart kicked up a gear. No coincidence, Linares muttered. We need to move this to containment. I agree. Kyle keyed his mic. Dispatch, confirm both canines are alerting. We need bomb squad or narcotics analysis. Immediate response. The reply came quicker this time. Understood. EOD unit en route. Estimated arrival 5 minutes. Word spread fast. Within 60 seconds, security had cordoned off the corner of the field. Stadium officials were pushing confused players back toward the locker rooms under the pretense of a delayed kickoff due to weather monitoring. The loudspeaker continued to pump in stadium music. They weren't letting the public know yet. Kyle finally had clearance to examine the football up close. Wearing gloves, he picked it up and immediately noticed something odd. It was heavier than it should have been, slightly off balance, just enough to be wrong. He shook it lightly, no sound. He pressed at the seams. One edge compressed differently, like a fake panel. Linares noticed. Feel that? He nodded grimly. Yeah. Minutes later, the EOD team arrived, headed by Sergeant Adil Kari, a meticulous tech who didn't talk much but had a sixth sense for traps. He took one look at the object and didn't waste time. The ball was secured in a containment unit and taken off-site to the mobile operations van just outside the arena. Inside that van, under the glare of X-ray imaging, what they found froze everyone in the room. Not wires, not explosives. Instead, 2 hollowed-out cavities inside the football, housing what looked like vacuum-sealed packets, powdery, off-white, tightly compacted. Corey looked up. Narcotics. Kyle blinked. You're sure? 100%. This is high-grade synthetic opioid, probably carfentanil. Trace amounts could kill dozens. The room fell silent. The ball wasn't meant to detonate. It was meant to circulate, get passed around on national TV, carried by players, handled by coaches, then likely smuggled back out by someone with access. Perfect Trojan horse. As word filtered back to Stadium Command, they kept the crowd calm, pretending the game was on hold due to an electrical delay. Inside the tunnels, however, something much larger was unfolding. Kyle watched the ball being sealed into a biohazard container. His stomach twisted. Someone had planned this. Someone with deep knowledge of the game's structure, timing, and movement patterns. And they hadn't acted alone. But the first sign hadn't come from technology or personnel. It had come from Zeke. The dog had sensed what no one else could. Again. Kyle knelt beside him outside the EOD van and ran a hand over his partner's fur. Zeke's tail thumped once, as if knowing the job wasn't over, but the first shot had been fired, or, in this case, barked. A single bark at a football near the sidelines had just opened the door to something massive, and what was waiting behind it, that would come next. The night sky over Davenport Metro Arena had shifted from golden dusk to deep indigo, but inside, time had all but stopped. The game was postponed, the crowd kept in limbo by a carefully crafted announcement. Technical delay. Please remain in your seats. Most fans remained unaware of the storm gathering just beneath their feet. Back inside the mobile operations van, the bomb squad and narcotics unit were carefully dissecting what they had recovered from the hollowed football. 2 vacuum-sealed packets, each weighing just under 400 grams, were already testing positive for carfentanil, a synthetic opioid 50 times stronger than fentanyl. It was potent enough that a single puncture in the packet could have sent thousands of microparticles airborne, a lethal dose in minutes for anyone within reach. Kyle stood quietly near the van entrance, his eyes locked on Zeke, who now rested near his handler's boots. Calm again, but still alert, always alert. Inside the stadium's security control center, the tension was thicker than the air in a locker room before kickoff. Captain Delaney stood at the helm, his broad shoulders hunched over a digital layout of the arena. Officers lined the walls, watching camera feeds, tracking communications. Who had access to that football? Delaney asked. Interns, coaching staff, field techs, replied Officer Linares. But we flagged something. The specific ball Zeke alerted on, it wasn't part of the batch used for warm-ups. It was switched. Switched? Yeah? Security footage shows a junior equipment handler, ID says Elliot Morrow, arriving at the storage cage at 5:13 p.m. He's assigned to water and towels, not gear. But he's seen retrieving something from the far shelf, then placing a single ball onto the main rack before walking out, alone. Delaney squinted. Pull everything on Morrow. And do we know where he is now? Officer Vega scanned her monitor. Last seen entering locker hallway B4. That's the secondary corridor. No exit footage. Either he's still inside or the room's intercom crackled to life. Dispatch, this is Officer Craig at Tunnel 3. We've got an unconscious staff member ID badge, says Elliot Morrow. Everyone stopped. Kyle's chest went cold. Repeat that, Officer Craig, Delaney asked. He's been drugged or knocked out. No obvious trauma. Badge and clothes intact. Someone took his identity. A sharp silence fell over the control center. Copy that, Delaney growled. We've got a breach. Back near the locker tunnels, Kyle crouched over the real Elliot Morrow with a medic. The young man, maybe 21, was breathing but barely responsive. His pupils are pinpoints, the medic said. They use something heavy, opioid sedative maybe, trying to make it look like he passed out on his own, Kyle muttered. But whoever did this walked in with his badge, his uniform, walked out unnoticed. Zeke stood beside him, nose twitching. Kyle had learned to trust Zeke's instincts more than anyone's, and right now the dog wasn't focused on the unconscious man. He was staring down Tunnel B4. You got something? Kyle asked softly. Zeke stepped forward, one paw then the next. His nose dropped, moving low. He wasn't alerting like before. No bark, but he was tracking. Kyle rose. He's picking something up. Delaney's voice buzzed in through the radio. Mercer, follow your Canine. Officer Vega will tap into interior cams to support you. Copy. Kyle and Zeke moved through the dimly lit corridor. The hallway was lined with storage doors, mop closets, gear crates, no one around, just the dull hum of overhead lights and the thump of crowd noise echoing faintly from the stands above. They reached a fork. Zeke stopped, sniffed the floor, then turned sharply to the left. Then, from up ahead, came the muffled clatter of something dropped, metal on concrete. Kyle stopped. Zeke growled. Seconds later, a figure in a janitor's uniform stepped into view. Tall, lean, too lean. Wrong build for the actual janitor whose name badge he wore. Kyle's hand hovered near his holster. Excuse me, Kyle said, voice calm. "You lost?" The man froze. Just for a split second, then he ran. Kyle gave chase, but Zeke didn't wait for a command. The dog was gone, a blur of muscle and drive, barreling down the hallway in pursuit. The imposter sprinted through a side door, bolting into the underbelly of the stadium, a place even some staff never visited, the mechanical level. Low ceilings, pipe networks, a labyrinth of concrete and rusted steel. Kyle heard Zeke barking ahead, close, then turning a corner. The hallway echoed with slamming footsteps and scuffed shoes. He rounded a bend and found Zeke standing firm in front of a shut utility room door, barking sharply. "Come out now," Kyle called. "We've got the area surrounded." No answer. From behind the door, silence. Kyle signaled for backup. Suspect cornered. Southeast maintenance wing. "Zeke has him." Two more officers arrived moments later. They breached the room with trained efficiency, but it was empty, except for a pile of janitorial gear and a hastily dumped gym bag. Inside the bag, two more sealed packets, identical to those found inside the football, and a small remote device. Kyle picked it up slowly. No obvious button, but a switch and a USB-C port. Maybe a trigger, maybe a signal relay. They'd come for the drop, not just the ball. Zeke sat beside the bag, looking up. He wasn't wagging his tail. He never did until the danger was fully gone. Back in the operations center, Delaney debriefed Kyle and Linares. "This isn't a smuggling op anymore," he said flatly. "This is coordinated infiltration. They brought in product through the gear, planted a decoy, impersonated staff, and had a triggerman on the inside. The football was just the public face of it. But this bag, this was the real delivery." Linares shook her head. "So why hide it at all?" Kyle answered quietly. "They didn't want to hide it. They wanted access. Through a sporting event. Security trusts the uniforms, the staff, the equipment. It's the one blind spot left." Delaney nodded grimly. "We've got names to track, faces to scan. Whoever planned this is testing something bigger." Kyle didn't respond. His hand dropped to Zeke's neck. The dog leaned into him slightly, a reassuring pressure between partners. They both knew it wasn't over. An hour later, the stadium was finally being cleared. Fans still had no idea what had occurred just below their feet. The official reason? Technical difficulties and safety concerns forced postponement. Tickets will be honored at a later date. Kyle sat on the rear bumper of the mobile unit, sipping from a bottle of warm water. Zeke lay beside him, head on his paws. Sergeant Curry joined him, holding a tablet. "We ran the serial numbers embedded in the ball's NFC chip," Curry said. "It was part of a stolen shipment from a factory in Mexico. Same model, same batch. Swapped out during transport last month." "Pre-modded overseas?" Kyle asked. Curry nodded. "Probably. Means they are building these things far from where they're being used, quietly, carefully, and smuggling them across borders disguised as legitimate sports gear." Kyle exhaled slowly. "The ball was the bait," he murmured. Curry nodded. "And we just took it." The next day, federal agents arrived. DEA, Homeland, Customs and Border Protection. Reports were filed. Evidence cataloged. The two packets in the bag, worth over $1.5 million on the street. And that was just tonight's load. They'd uncovered a sliver of something vast. A network using the unlikeliest of avenues, sports as its highway. All of it began with one strange alert from a dog no one else would have taken seriously. But Kyle had. He always would. By morning, the story had started to crack the edges of local news. Unspecified threat delays major college game. Suspicious item leads to postponement. But the truth hadn't been released. Not yet. And not all of it ever would be. For Officer Kyle Mercer, the headlines weren't the point. The night before had exposed something calculated, something layered, and the reality of it was still sinking in. The arena had been turned into a test site, a live trial for smuggling high-grade narcotics hidden inside objects no one would question. A football, a janitor's duffel, a face in the crowd pretending to belong, and at the heart of that exposure was Zeke. Kyle stood in the precinct briefing room now, facing a board of agents from 3 federal departments. The air was thick with cigarette breath, coffee, and stress. On the digital display behind him were high-resolution scans of the altered football, the narcotics packaging, and several freeze frames from stadium security footage. One in particular, the imposter janitor, was highlighted in red. "We're working facial rec across shared intelligence databases," said Special Agent Maynard from the DEA. Interpol's flagged a similar MO from a cartel-linked cell in Argentina. Same chemical composition, similar build-out hollow objects with custom resin barriers to mimic bounce weight. Captain Delaney, arms folded, added, "This wasn't local. This was a rehearsal, a probe." Maynard nodded. "They weren't just testing our security, they were testing how far they could go unnoticed." Kyle stayed quiet. He knew it. He'd seen it in the way the false staffer moved, the quiet confidence, the precision. They hadn't expected a problem, not from stadium staff, not from campus police, certainly not from a dog. Later that afternoon, Kyle returned to the arena. The fans were gone now, the field silent. A cold breeze rustled the flags. In the east corner of the end zone, near the 40-yard line, Zeke walked slowly across the artificial turf, sniffing, pausing, moving again. Not working, just checking. Kyle followed him without saying much. The arena felt different now, like it had been violated, and only those who had witnessed it could feel the residue. Beneath the triumphs and touchdowns, beneath the roar of fans and the blare of horns, someone had quietly infiltrated, not with bombs or weapons, but with quiet death disguised as sport. And yet they hadn't succeeded. Zeke had stopped it. That evening, Kyle sat alone on his back porch, the first cup of hot coffee he'd had in 24 hours, steaming gently between his palms. Zeke lay at his feet, eyes closed but ears still twitching, never fully off duty. The sun dropped low behind the tree line, casting gold across the fence, the grass, Zeke's dark fur. Kyle leaned down and scratched behind his partner's ear. "You know what you did, right?" Zeke opened one eye. Kyle smiled. "You didn't just stop a game. You stopped something they didn't think could be stopped." He paused, the words heavier now. "They thought no one would notice, that what they hid inside that football was too small, too clever, too quiet." Zeke's tail thumped once. "They forgot about you." 2 days later, the press conference unfolded outside Davenport PD headquarters. The public version of the story was carefully curated. Captain Delaney detailed how a suspicious object had been detected during a routine sweep. He praised stadium staff for cooperation. He emphasized that the threat had been contained, the public never in danger. The media, starved for spectacle, pushed for details, but the story behind the story, that stayed buried, until one reporter raised her hand. "Officer Mercer," she asked, "can you tell us what made you investigate that football in the first place?" Kyle stood at the podium. He hesitated, then looked to his left, where Zeke sat, calm, professional, but unmistakably present. "It wasn't me," Kyle said. "It was him." The cameras clicked. He barked, and I listened. That's how we work. Always. The moment was brief. The press moved on. But something in the silence that followed stuck with the people who watched. An unspoken reverence for the unseen, for the underestimated, for the dog that said everything without words. Weeks passed. The forensics team confirmed that the narcotics were from a new variant not yet in circulation, likely part of an unreleased batch designed to be tasteless, odorless, and immune to conventional screening. The false janitor was never found. His image was distributed to national watch lists, but no matches. Not yet. Still, thanks to the recovery of the internal trigger device, analysts were able to trace a digital fingerprint, a trail of remote IP pings that originated from servers in the Netherlands, rerouted through Moldova, and bounced to a shell corporation in Nevada. Every discovery only revealed how vast the system was and how small the crack was that Zeke had found, but a crack was enough. It always started that way. One morning, a few months later, Kyle received a letter from the Department of Justice, a commendation for exceptional service, detection, and interdiction contributing to the disruption of international narcotics trafficking. It came with a small plaque and a silver coin, but Kyle placed them both in a drawer. Instead, he framed something else. A photo from the security cam the moment Zeke first barked. Mid-motion, eyes fixed, body tense, the moment everything began. He placed it above his desk, right next to his badge. Zeke didn't need awards. He didn't need headlines. He needed what every dog needed to be heard. And because someone had listened, 50,000 people left that arena unaware that they had walked within feet of death and been spared by a partner who didn't speak in words, but in warnings, in instincts, in one bark at the edge of a football field. That wasn't just a football, and that wasn't just a dog. If you like these kind of real stories, just imagine what's coming next. These incredible dogs are out there changing lives, and you don't want to miss a single one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the pack before the next story drops.